Welcome to Housing for Huntsvillians, the podcast, a podcast about one couple's quest to eliminate homelessness in Huntsville by August 2026.
And I believe we are good. Recording. Fantastic.
Awesome. Welcome to the Housing for Huntsvillians podcast. Today, we are taking a little dip into electoral politics. We are joined by Elijah Boyd, who is running in the special election for District 10, Alabama State Representative. And this he's running on the Libertarian Party ticket. And, you know, we've reached out to the Democrat who's running, and I need to reach out to the Republican. But it's kind of cool to have Elijah on first because he is kind of the reason we're having this election. Elijah, welcome to the pod. And if you wouldn't mind, tell us that story.
All right. Well, thank you. I'm kind of the reason. I'm not absolutely the reason. David Cole was the Republican candidate last year, won the general election in November. And there was some questions concerning his residency, questions that another Republican candidate, Anson Knowles, had raised to the Madison County GOP, and they ignored. And then they kicked Anson Knowles off of their primary ballot. So the primary contest was canceled for the Republicans last year, and for that district race. And there's I think Alabama political reporter, scoping the joint, taking pictures. Saw him walking his dog at his old residence. And so I raised a case. I sued him based on, what I thought, that he was unqualified to be the representative based on Alabama law. And, he tried to get it dismissed, that the state house controls who is in their membership or not. And that is true. But we went to the Supreme Court and argued that we should be able to proceed with depositions and evidence gathering underneath court law. And then, the final ruling would be based on, the state house, what they determined. So we finally got all of the depositions finished, I think in February, between, motions to dismiss and objections and all that. It took 3 or 4 months from when I started. And I think I had, was filing paperwork in November still, like the month of the election. There was a special election this summer. The House didn't ever bring up that case. They never, ruled on it. And I kind of thought the case was lost due to apathy or corruption. Right in the end of August, I heard through my connections that the Attorney General was going to file criminal felony charges against him. And so that's what happened. Just the last week of September, or last week of August, or the first week of September, they filed felony charges against him for voting in the election, not for his qualifications as representative and the House that the House seat that he took, but just for going to the primary ballot, or going and voting as a voter himself in the primary and the general election. So yeah, as part of the plea deal, he resigned his office. He's going to pay back all of his earnings from the state, and he's going to spend like 59 days in jail.
Wow.
Which none of that was my goal. I'm not a big put people in jail kind of guy. So it was odd resolution to this whole thing, which I was just wanting to get him kicked out of office, which also happened.
So you got 3.4% of the vote, according to Ballotpedia, in the election that David Cole won, right?
Yeah.
So why did you go through all this? Like, what motivated you to push this forward?
Well, I mean, I don't expect that, I'll just get like paraded into office this election.
I didn't think so.
Well, I'm a minor party candidate. I'm part of the Libertarian Party. I've been with them for, I guess, 2015. So 8 years now. And, I know the troubles it takes because of political election law for minor parties to get on the ballot. And, these laws that they've created to hinder us are terrible. Like, it is really a game that they've played to limit selection to voters and such.
Can you talk about some of the laws that hinder third parties?
Sure. To get my name on the ballot, and I'm going to have to do that this election cycle as well, is I have to collect 5% of the voters that had voted for the governor in the last governor gubernatorial race, right? So
in your district?
In my district.
Okay.
So like that's the count, and I think I need 477 valid registered voter signatures to get my name on the ballot.
And the two major parties don't have to do that?
They don't have to do that, no.
Okay.
And if we were ever to maintain ballot access, like we had got enough votes to keep on the ballot, we need 20% in Alabama, which is, I think, the highest or one of the highest vote retention points. And
what's the stated justification for these laws?
I don't know that they've justified them. They just get to do whatever they want when they have the power.
Yeah. Okay.
The last time that we had retained ballot access was in the early 2000s. And I think we had gotten somewhere around 15, 16, 17%. And we kept it for a whole nother election cycle. And in that legislative session, they raised it to 20%.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. Just the cowardice.
So, yeah, we have to start somewhere with the Libertarian Party. We want to keep the power, the political power in check. And, we don't see that a lot in Alabama with basically a supermajority. Every house, every chamber of the state legislature and the governor's office, it's all Republican.
Yeah.
It's not representative anymore where it's going. So I challenge the election because, I think the election laws that keep minor parties in check should also be followed by the major parties. And,
okay.
With the Madison County ignoring the evidence, that they were presented with way before the primary even happened, March or April or something like that. It's just like they didn't care to follow the rules. And, the poor guy, David Cole, no one even tried to check him, or as far as I know. And, if the GOP had been, the Madison County Committee had been on their game, he wouldn't have been in jail. He wouldn't have been separated from his family. Mm-hmm. I do kind of wonder if he was the fall guy and, someone else was giving him bad advice about, what he needed to do or what he could do as far as running in that election. But I don't know, maybe he did it all on his own. I don't know.
Kind of doesn't matter. I think what you're saying has validity. Maybe once. And again, you don't want a system. Did you have to hire a lawyer to do any of this, or did you just do it yourself?
No, I did. I had a lawyer. He was out of Birmingham. I can't recall his name, but he's on all of the filing documents.
Was it expensive? Like, did you self-fund this, or was this campaign funds, or?
It was not campaign funds. I didn't have to self-fund it.
Okay.
That was all covered.
That's good.
From some generous community members who are welcome to name themselves.
Right.
But
there's, it's not a great system where you're having to have like donors hire lawyers to enforce laws.
Yeah,
it's not ideal.
What? Yeah, I don't know what could be done better. People following the law, I guess, is preferable.
And in this case, I think it's a good law, or it at least makes sense. Like, your representative should live in the district they're representing.
Mm-hmm.
Makes sense to me. But
I'm not sure. Maybe I shouldn't talk about things that I'm not sure of, but I think this law goes all the way back to the Civil War.
I don't doubt it.
With North Alabama legislators being ousted out of office and then reseated by Montgomery-friendly pro-slavery legislators.
Oh, wow.
So
Fascinating.
So it was like North Alabama wasn't even represented. They had gotten all of their legislators kicked out.
So you are part of the LP, and I was curious about your thoughts on the LP, especially in recent years.
Ooh.
Yeah. Sorry.
I guess we're talking about national, or are we talking about state?
Yeah, I don't know anything about Alabama State LP. And I really don't know that much about national. I've just heard about the Mises takeover, and I've seen some of the statements from national representatives that were very disheartening. Seems like there was a real mask off shift to the alt-right within the LP. Not that the LP was ever great in my estimation, but it seems to have really gone downhill kind of since Trump. So I was just, as someone who's actually a part of it and running for office, what your thoughts are.
When the Mises started getting attention, I was kind of excited, the Mises caucus, because it seemed like they were on Austrian economics and, individual liberty, right?
Right.
We can ignore all of the rest of this BS stuff. And that seemed cool. I was like, yeah, we can just talk about the economics of freedom, right? And sound money and all this. And that was cool. I like that. It seemed very soon that they got pulled into social issues, which was not their strong suit. And they got, I thought they got excoriated. Yes, you all suck on this issue. Don't talk about it. And anytime at all, someone could just, press their button and they would go off. And, I don't like it. I don't, I think it's a bad representation of what the LP should be, we shouldn't care how someone identifies themselves or the relationships that they're in. That's that's no business of any political party, no political office, right? You can be yourself. And the thing is a lot of people are saying, oh, we'll see how bad it was. And well, there's a reason why the Mises caucuses exist, is because the kind of the control or leadership before didn't also care about sound money, and they were in the social issues for other reasons, I guess. And I'm neither happy they're gone or sad they're gone. It's I don't know. You know, the state party has its own problems, but as far as I know, we don't have that problem in the state of Alabama.
Yeah, the states are very different. Like some of the state LP, and I'm going 1000% based on their Twitter accounts. But I see some of the state LP tweets, and they're like, yes, good, love it. And some of the state LP tweets, I am infuriated and disgusted. So it's very variable. I honestly know absolutely nothing about Alabama's LP, and that's part of why I wanted to have you on, is to just like, you know, get a little more information about libertarians in North Alabama and in Alabama generally. Yeah, and maybe we can talk about sound money. I'm interested in that. I'm familiar with the Austrian theory of the business cycle, but this is a podcast about housing and homelessness, so
Okay.
I feel like we should talk about that while we have you. Housing and homelessness is mostly handled at the municipal level, and you're going to the state, right? Or you would go to the state if you were elected. I guess I'm curious about what you see as the proper state like solution to, or something that the state could do or could stop doing to help with the housing and homelessness problem.
Well, I don't know if this is directly. There's many things that the state does as far as occupational licensing that makes it harder for people to get jobs that pay well and can, where they can afford to meet their basic needs.
Yeah, I think occupational licensure is huge, and that's actually something I wanted to talk to you about, because it seems like the state, Alabama, is really looking into occupational licensure right now. It looks like they're looking to disband the massage licensure board. I think there's talk about like consolidating all of the different occupational licensure boards into like one body. I know in other states they've started to look at occupational licensure and implement more like reciprocity between states. So if you're licensed in one state, then like I think Arizona adopted a lot of reciprocal licensure, where if you're licensed in any state, you're licensed in Arizona. So I was just curious if like you knew anything more about those moves and, you know, what you would support if you were in office in terms of occupational licensure.
I would support anything that limits the power of the state to basically crown people as worthy in their profession. We have those things. It's, Google reviews and Yelp.
Right.
And there are also private
Right.
certifications that people can, get certified through those professional organizations that don't require the state to have their own on top of that. And
so like the Obama administration did a study of occupational licensure laws and found that they're purported to increase safety and quality, and they do neither of those things. The only thing they do is limit employment and increase costs for consumers. So yeah, I mean, this isn't just like libertarian speak. Like this is like the Obama administration. Like the data is there. Occupational licensure exists to increase the salaries for people who get the licenses. That's pretty much it. And when it comes to housing and homelessness, yeah, I mean, obviously your ability to get work and especially like, more professional work is certainly tied to housing and homelessness. So I think we do need to streamline getting people into professions by getting rid of barriers to entry like occupational licensure. So yeah, I mean, like if I could. If I could snap my fingers and just get rid of every occupational licensure law, like I would in a second for sure. But yeah, what else would you look or?
Well, I think one of the the very origins, like all of this political power, state power, is zoning laws, which like limit what you can do with your own property. And, if you want to be in some, if you want to open up like a home-based business,
right?
And, now you can share your bills between, at one location, and still, provide for your family and such. Like the zoning laws create a artificial scarcity.
Yes. Why is daycare so expensive? Partly it's because it's very difficult to open a home daycare due to zoning and other regulations.
Yeah.
If we had more providers, prices would decrease.
And, and that would be good for, many people that have to, balance. All right, do I work or do I take care of my kids?
Yeah.
What's this cat's name?
That's Tails. This is Sonic. So yeah, I would definitely get rid of zoning. I don't know. I guess it could be done at the state level, but most ordinances are at the city level.
Yeah. I don't know what, I wouldn't want to preempt laws. She's all right, or he.
They're both boys, but whatever.
There are laws that I could, there may be laws that I would support if it, reduced barriers to entry, increased freedom, and lowered the power of the state.
Yeah. I think one thing that's interesting about libertarians is that they tend to want it's not like federalism, but when you're talking about like cities, but they tend to want the laws made at the like lowest level. But when it comes to certain things, particularly land use, local control is actually like terrible. Like you want to move the decision making upward actually, right? So if you give people the ability to determine how land is used in their neighborhood or in their district, then what happens is these decisions usually are made by people who have the most time and energy and most on the line as individuals. So primarily older, wealthier, whiter homeowners with higher property values. They're the ones who show up to the meetings. They're the ones who write the representatives, call, vote. And so they get their way, and that's how you end up with more exclusionary zoning, more restrictive building codes, fewer naturally affordable forms of housing in these desirable neighborhoods. So it's kind of ironic that like sometimes you have to move the decision making up in terms of how local it is in order to get more freedom.
And that's because at a higher level you would have more neutrality.
You would have more people who benefit from greater freedom involved in the discussion. So if you have like one district that's like majority white and wealthy, and then the land use decisions are made just by the voters in that district. If instead you say, okay, and I know more about San Francisco because I lived in San Francisco for 4 years, and I have only been back in Huntsville for a year and a half, and I was very involved in the housing fight in San Francisco. But, in San Francisco, for example, those land use decisions are often made, like on a neighborhood basis. Well, the people who benefit from new housing aren't the current residents. It's the future residents.
Yeah.
And it's not the residents of that neighborhood. It's the entire city benefits when new housing comes into a particular neighborhood. And so if you instead have these decisions about land use made at the city level, then San Francisco's 70% renters. Every single renter benefits every time a new apartment gets built, right?
Right.
So that's why when you make land use decisions at the city level, you end up with better decisions because the people who benefit have more of a voice compared to the people who might see their property values not rise as quickly.
Yeah, I would be interested. I do follow that principle that, control and decision-making power at the lowest level, and hopefully at the individual level is the greatest form of freedom. When you, are subject to laws that you don't agree with, that aren't allowing you to spread your wings, maybe you can move, to the next county over, to the next town, and get a better environment for what you're doing. But as those laws get created at higher levels, to the state and then to the federal government, there is less ability for people to vote with their feet.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds great, except that for the vast majority of American families, their biggest source of personal wealth and savings is home equity, which means they're not making moves based on the laws of their jurisdiction, or they're making moves based on how that will impact their personal wealth.
Yeah.
So I think that's one more reason. Like, I agree with you. Like, I want nothing more than a society in which someone doesn't like something that happens next to them or happens at their city government or whatever, and just move instead of tries to control everything, to force everyone to conform to their vision of what the world should look like. But until we have a society where we see housing as a utility as opposed to a vehicle in personal wealth creation, a vehicle for personal wealth creation and savings. So, I think the main reason I care about this is because housing cannot be a vehicle for wealth creation and broadly affordable at the same time. And I care about housing being affordable. But it also keeps people in houses that they might not necessarily want to be in because all their savings and wealth are wrapped up in this house, and other kinds of problems. But enough about that. So
I'm totally interested, but we can talk about this later.
Yeah, for sure. I think another thing that I wanted to ask you is why are you running? Like, what are the three issues, let's say, that you're, so your ideas are so much better than the Republican and the Democrat that, you think you should be elected? How, what are the policies you're going to push for that are going to make D10 residents' lives, so much better?
Well, I don't have it nailed down to just three issues. I think being open to working with both the Democrats and the Republicans on this. There is there's no love in the state legislature. There's no love for people without money. Our last term, we had this gas tax passed. I think it immediately put like a 8 or 10 cent per gallon tax on every gallon of gas. And that's, people have to use gasoline to get to work, to get home and to get their kids to school. And it's a regressive tax. I think regressive taxes are the worst, when you have people spending money that they don't really have, but in a greater degree than, people that are better off. It's like more of their money is devoted as a percentage to paying for this tax.
So you're a libertarian for progressive taxation?
I'm a libertarian against regressive taxation.
Okay. All right. How do you feel about a land value tax?
So I would like zero taxes.
Sure.
But a land value tax seems to be the most palatable, where you have governments that enforce boundaries, maintain records for ownership, and you're not taxing people as they work and contribute to society, building their community, and then like immediately take money out of their pocket for working. Right. I mean, we should be incentivizing working rather than taxing it.
Yeah, I agree. And the problem with taxing consumption as well is that we need people to consume as well. Unless you have some kind of rebate, it ends up being regressive to tax consumption because poor people spend a greater percentage of their paycheck on consumption than rich people. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think one of the things I really like about a land value tax is that it discourages what you would want to discourage, which is poorly utilizing land.
Yeah. Or hoarding it. Right.
I would count that under poorly utilizing it. Yeah. The problem with getting wealth from land is that it's negative sum. It's at best zero sum. If I buy a piece of land, if I buy, lumber and turn it into furniture and I sell it to you, everybody wins, right? You get furniture, I get money, a new thing is created. I'm incentivized to, for example, innovate a faster, cheaper way to turn lumber into furniture. If I buy a piece of land and then prevent other people from building around me to make that land more scarce, and that is how I profit, I've stolen wealth from the people who would otherwise like to buy and develop that land or who would otherwise live on that land. It's just a transfer of wealth, usually upwards, because the people who buy land tend to have more money than the people who have to rent it. See what I'm saying? So it's a very yucky way to build wealth versus, exchanges or innovation or selling something or building something or like doing something.
Are you talking about unimproved land, or like people that are buying land and then building apartment complexes on it?
I'm talking about people who are buying land and then not improving it and not allowing things to be built on their land and using the force of the state to prevent people from building on land around their land, which is how land gets more valuable, is you prevent it from being used to the fullest, right? If Huntsville had no zoning and no building codes, our property values would not have skyrocketed. It would not cost, double what it cost 2 years ago to rent an apartment in Huntsville if everyone could if any developer could just buy any plot of land and build as many apartments of whatever type that they wanted on them.
Yeah, I mean, I have a big lot. I could put another house behind my house.
What
if I was allowed to.
Right. And what if everyone who wanted to could do that? Would it solve the housing crisis? No, but would it help? Like, absolutely. It would help those homeowners, it would help those renters, and it would decrease average rents or at least slow the increase. So yeah, I think that makes sense. Okay. So you want non-regressive taxation. What else? Oh, the other thing I wanted to ask you about, since we're on taxation and state policy. So I heard tell that someone wants to create a larger exemption for property taxes. So right now, people of a certain income, like below a certain income threshold, are exempt from paying property taxes in Alabama, is my understanding.
Okay.
And so they're proposing raising that cap because of inflation, I guess.
On their primary residence, right? It's like a homestead?
Yes.
Okay. So not on rental properties and not on...
Not as far as I know.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what's the question?
The question is, to me, I get where they're coming from with this, but I'm reminded of Prop 13 in California. Are you familiar with that?
No.
So in the 80s,
property taxes were skyrocketing because property values were skyrocketing because California implemented all this zoning, which meant high demand areas weren't building enough homes to keep up with demand. So when you have a lot of demand increase and supply stays steady, prices rise. So as part of the quote unquote taxpayers revolt, they passed Prop 13, which basically cemented in that year's property tax rates for existing homeowners. Well, this was very stupid because it created a huge disincentive for selling, which further exacerbated the housing crisis because then you've got people in the wrong size homes for their needs longer than they should be. And it didn't even end up saving California homeowners any money because the state just raised fees and fines and levies and other taxes to make up for everything that they lost with the property tax. And so if you want property taxes to stay steady, it seems to me the better way would be to keep property values steady by building enough housing to keep up with demand where it's growing. Because I totally understand where like you're on a fixed income for whatever reason and your property taxes are going up. You don't like that. But it's like, well, we can just prevent that for everyone by allowing developers to develop more homes on these high value lots near these homes that are rising in value. Does that make sense?
It does. I mean, what I think politicians seem to forget is that when they make changes in the market, and such drastic ones, is that like it's in a dynamic environment and people will respond in their own best interest, which they absolutely should do. But they will find out a way where that law impacts them the least. It's totally fine, but you're not going to get the desired effect when they don't have as much intelligence as the market has as far as decision making, and whatever rules that they make are going to be are not made in the vacuum.
Right.
At least the Homestead Act in Alabama is not going to prevent people from moving. Is that they'll still be able to get their exemption in a different house in a different county. It's like they don't have to stay in wherever they're at.
However, the very fact that their property taxes are high indicates their property values are high, which then indicates that they probably have a decent amount of wealth wrapped up in their house.
I think there's a cap on it as well.
Cap on what?
A cap on the value, like $500,000 or $600,000 as far as the property valuation, something like that. So it's.
What do you mean? Like if their home is worth more than $500,000, then they're not exempt from property taxes?
I think so.
Okay, but like $200,000 is a lot of housing wealth for someone who's at an income level that they're exempt from property taxes in Alabama.
I mean, I don't know that we should just go on taxing them.
I don't, that's not what I'm suggesting.
Yeah.
What I'm suggesting is instead of doing these little,
basically discounts that.
Yeah, these like kludges, right? It's like we have a problem created by bad policy. And instead of fixing the policy that created the problem we're now trying to solve, we're trying to tweak things to, it's like whack-a-mole, where we've created this problem with bad policy. And so like, oh, we're hurting poor people, so like, let's give them a bigger discount. But it's like, okay, but you're not solving the problem that you could solve more cleanly, more like in such a way that would like not just solve this problem, but solve a whole host of other problems caused by the same policy. You see what I'm saying?
I do. And I do agree that we should simplify all of the laws so we're not creating onesies and twosies.
Simplify the laws and get rid of, ideally, zoning and building codes. Because I agree with you. Like, people are like, oh, we need building codes to have safety. Well, we really don't. I think a system of torts could absolutely help with safety. I think private organizations could certify home builders. A lot of these building codes are outdated. They're actually mandating methods of building that are less safe than what people have innovated in the meantime. And I think that when you say politicians are not smarter than the market, I can feel my own eyes rolling. But at the same time, when I was in San Francisco, I was reading about the ghost ship fire, and there were a bunch of fires in warehouses in the East Bay. And I read this one story, and what had happened was people were living in warehouses because housing was so expensive. And obviously, Oakland is not the manufacturing hub it used to be. So you've got a lot of warehouses that aren't being otherwise used. So people are living in them. Well, it's not legal to live in a warehouse. So they couldn't get it wired up correctly. These warehouses wired up correctly. So they were using extension cords in one of these warehouses to provide power to all of the rooms. Well, a building inspector came in and saw that they were using these extension cords and said, this is a fire hazard, and confiscated the extension cords. And we don't know, but there's evidence to indicate that one of them caught fire because the residents started using candles once they didn't have their extension cords.
Oh, man.
And so, yeah, you're never going to have enough building inspectors to do the job that a functional market does. That when housing is abundant, people choose housing that is safer.
Yeah.
When housing is abundant, landlords have an incentive to keep their tenants by maintaining their properties correctly. And you can try to use the force of law to force landlords to maintain their properties, and you can try to have building inspectors come in and force people living in warehouses to do them more safely, but it just doesn't end up working as well as just a functional competitive marketplace works to provide adequate housing.
Right. The zoning laws have given the power to the landlords, and now they don't have to compete on safety or whatever. They just have, we'll go find a better spot.
Good luck.
Yeah, good luck.
Right.
Yeah, it sounds like multiple failures when they didn't have housing, so they found it in the warehouse.
Right.
They couldn't wire it up as they would want to with boxes and such because it was illegal to live there.
Right.
And then they couldn't use electric cords. I mean, it was just
yeah.
Here are all of these things. Government sucks. Government sucks. Government sucks. Government sucks.
Pretty much. And I know that's a simplistic way to look at it, but it's it's also the evidence. And it's just frustrating as well because the argument for the building code is, we don't want to have substandard housing. Well, right now we have fully code compliant housing that's, on average, a studio in Huntsville goes for $850 a month. And then you have tents and park benches. Maybe there should be something in between. Maybe it should be legal to build and inhabit something in between a fully code compliant, zoning compliant, $850 studio and a fucking tent. I don't know. You know what I mean? So it's just, we're letting the perfect, quote unquote, be the enemy of the good. And it's really easy for someone who's housed and comfortable to say well, we need standards. And it's okay, but back here in reality, what are these people supposed to do?
Yeah, that first step to get
the lowest
into a
rungs
house
of the housing ladder. We need to legalize the lowest rungs of the housing ladder. Absolutely.
Right. You can't build wealth in, a fabric and an aluminum construction,
Not that housing should be a source of wealth, but how do you even get to your job? How do you that's the thing, is homelessness is so expensive. It's ruins the physical and mental health of the people experiencing it. It ends up being very expensive for cities. It's, you know, disheartening, obviously, for everyone involved. And so it's a policy choice. Like, we've chosen homelessness. That's the whole point of the podcast. But anyway, okay. We've been talking a while, and I just want to give you, well, one, I want to point out that the special election is March 26th.
Yes.
There's a primary on December 12th. I assume you're running unopposed on the LP.
Right. We're not going to have a primary election. That is a benefit that is only for the major parties and a cost to the taxpayers. Yay.
Oh, interesting.
Alabama.
Okay.
Before the primary, though, I need to get all of those signatures collected. Okay. So if you see me in your neighborhood.
Okay. Well, you won't be in ours because we're not in your district.
Not in your yeah. But just ask that you help us get out and get our name on the ballot. It's not a vote for us. It doesn't register you as a party member.
If you are not completely happy with the Alabama GOP and Alabama Democratic Party, it's not necessarily saying you love the Libertarians, but just that maybe they should have a little bit of competition.
Yeah, I think the Republicans would be better if they had, if they were actually kept in check by alternative, you know?
Yeah.
So.
Okay, well, we'll probably have you on again at some point. There's much more to discuss, but
I'll take it on. I'll get better on homelessness and housing by the next
Wonderful.
time. I'm
Awesome.
sorry. I'm so sorry.
No. I mean, like I said, it's mostly handled at the local level. Though I will say, I'm going to send you some things. There are moves, again, because cities are often loath to upzone. There have been successful instances of states preempting cities' exclusionary zoning. So that may be something that we would need to explore. I hope not. I hope Huntsville just happily upzones, but if not, we got the state level. Anyway, thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, thanks.
It was so wonderful to meet you.
Thank you, Kathy. And Rob. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, it was great meeting you. Sorry, I'm back here holding one of the cats at bay still, so. No, thank you for coming on.
Yeah.
Very much appreciated.
Awesome. See you guys next week.
Does that sign off?
Oh, no, whatever you have.
So some good news is we have, I'm running for state office, but we did retain ballot access for the county.
Okay.
So the Libertarians are going to be on the ballot, and they're going to run their first ever primary for county seats that, may have more influence over the housing and zoning inside of Madison County. So you could check out lpalabama.org. That's the state website. There's LPMCA, MCA, so it's Libertarian Party, Madison County, Alabama.org. There'll be information on there about our offices in the county, and my website is electelijah.com.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
electelijah.com.
All right, you heard it here. Check those out.
Thanks.
All right. We'll see you guys next week.